Welcome back, Larry. We're here for obviously another Astros weekly recap. Today is May 6th. Um, we've had a lot of baseball between now and the last time we talked, which I believe was the 27th or so.
Yeah,
Actually, or the 25th, possibly.
25th, I think. Yeah.
I think it's the 25th, yeah. So, with that being said, uh, you know, I guess it's a good spot to kind of touch on it lightly. Did we see anything good? How we felt? And I know we've got some juicy topics to talk about because we had to kick the hot seat out because it boiled over and we could no longer track the couldn't track the temperature of the room or the seat for Abreu because he's pretty much sitting in West Palm Beach, so he's probably in the mid to high 80s, humid, and um, trying to find that timing. So hopefully all goes well for him.
Yeah, so it's an interesting week. I mean, there were some highs, there were some lows. It's really tough that they couldn't take two of this last series, but hey, I guess we went 3-3, and so I guess we can look at that as progress from where we were. But I think we'll show folks some of the reasons, like some of the stuff we'll talk about, maybe help explain the challenges of where we are. Um, and so, folks, all I'll say to you guys, because I know what's coming, buckle in because when Clint and I break down stuff, we're not going to just be throwing out wild like opinions. We're going to give you a lot of data. I mean, they may be wild opinions. I won't discount that. But we're going to have a lot of data and we're going to show you maybe why we've been saying stuff. You're essentially going to get like three articles that I haven't written tonight and I won't write because I'm going to give it to you in a video format. And we got a lot of stuff coming, I think a lot of really interesting stuff to kind of explain where we are with the Astros, um, some signs of hope, some signs of challenges. And so, Clint, let's go. I guess before we get too deep,
Before we
I would
start,
ask,
I was gonna say you
yeah,
beat me to it.
yeah, can, so if you're watching the video, wherever you're watching it on Clint's channel, my channel, go subscribe to both. All right. Look, I'm at like 97 subscribers. Let's get Larry the GM to 100 subscribers tonight and subscribe to the channel, like the video. Then, like we're having the Larry. So it's May 6th, that otherwise known as the 2 days after Larry the GM's birthday. Right, Larry's birthday was May 4th. Um, and so we have a birthday sale going on the website, and we've had one person sign up, and I think a couple others are looking at it. Like, guys, we're about to show you Larry the GM's on a hot streak with the moneymaker data, and literally, if you had signed up at any point in the last few days and laid down some money on these bets, you'd have all your money back, and you would have paid for the moneymaker data for a year. And it's just silly to me. Like if you guys are gambling and you're not paying for the moneymakers, you're just doing it
I guess
wrong.
the
I mean,
easiest way
guys,
I could say, Larry, is I took advantage of it the other night with the Kyle Tucker Mitch Garver bet, and I turned a small bet into a big bet. So I am one of the lucky ones so far, and I appreciate it. So I think it's just a testament to you and everything that comes out of the site. Guys, there's valuable content there, and it can be used to your help, to your benefit, and a lot of it is just it keeps things going, it keeps us moving, and it keeps us being able to push this stuff out day after day. So
yeah,
subscribe, like, share, get your friends to come watch and listen and share with them, because I think our biggest goal, Larry, is, as the header said, is we're talking about a game within a game, and we want you to be just as knowledgeable and probably even more knowledgeable than those that you're talking with about this game, and we hope that we provide that day in and day out. And so, Larry, with that, I think we should just hop right in.
yeah. I mean, guys, yeah, let's do it, Clint. Let's go on, and we'll show folks what we're going to talk about. But yeah, The thing is going to be different tonight. We're going to give you a lot of data, and I'm going to ask you guys don't get too worried about every number on here. We'll dig into the numbers, but we'll take a step back. A lot of times we use the heat map to explain what we're looking at. So we're going to start with a moneymaker update. Then we'll talk about Abreu, and then we'll talk about who's up, who's down, like who's hot, who's cold right now. Singleton update. We're going to talk about John and what he's been doing. We got Loperfido and Cabbage both on the team, and we're going to talk specifically how they should be used before Chaz gets back, and we'll even talk about like once Chaz gets back, how this team could manage the resources it has. I know folks there's been a lot of debate online about like when they need to make this adjustment to the lineup. They need to make this lineup. Like Clint, we were on like this is the power of the Larry GM on Twitter Space. We were on Twitter Space. We were discussing the lineup, and old Larry the GM said, "Well, what about Tucker batting second?" There was
And where was
silence.
he?
Larry, that might be right. The next
Yeah.
night, Tucker was batting second. So I don't know. I don't know, guys. I'm just saying. You do with that whatever you want.
Mhm.
Then Clint is going to do an incredible job breaking down Hater and Slider. If you haven't, like, don't leave early because Clint is going to break down Hater and the Slider and probably in a much like there's nobody on the radio that's going to do what Clint's about to do talking about Hater and the Slider. All right, so there you go. Let's get into it, Clint. Let's talk money makers. So all right, so guys, through yesterday, the moneymakers are 64 and 67, slightly under 500. Now, if you know where we've been, we're mounting a major comeback, okay? And
Yeah.
maybe it's because I'm getting better at figuring out how to deploy the data. But since Abreu, I guess Abreu was there, man. Since Mexico City, the moneymaker picks are 22 and 13, 629. If you bet $100 base bet, so sometimes if it's a minus 120, that turns into $120 bet, right? So $4,036. Well, you say, Larry, I don't have $4,000 to bet. All right. Well, you take the tenth of that. Okay. Say you bet $400. The money makers that bet the $100 base bet are up 26%. Now you tell me what investment you would have made 26% on in the last week, and then tell me you don't want to pay the 15. That sale is on right now. You literally could pay for the money makers of any day the last 7 days. You could have paid for your money makers for the entire year. The So May the 4th, my birthday, we cut a fourth of the price off the money makers and premium data. Get either one, sign up for a year, you get a fourth off the price, and I'm hot. We're going to get results like this. And even Alvarez has come through the last couple nights for me. So there you go. So Alvarez has been the weighing us down, but we are mounting the comeback, and the moneymakers are scoring. So jump on in. You just go to the website, click on the pricing page, and you can sign. Well, you don't even have to click on. Just sign up on the site. It's the first
Mhm.
thing you see. All right, let's go on, Clint. I don't
Yeah,
enough of
and
that.
don't and anybody who's upset or doubting Alvarez, I wouldn't. He's just
Yeah,
good. He'll turn it around.
that's right. I'm
We still
not.
got a
I'm
lot
not.
of
I'm not
baseball
shying
left.
away from the Alvarez bets. So, all right, let's go. Brady, you update. So, I mean, Clint, you want to talk about this?
I
I
mean,
mean,
it's pretty straightforward, as everybody knows. He's down in West Palm Beach. They're hoping to get him right. So I think the story was he's spending some time with family, then he's going to get over to the facility and start working on this. But there is no defined timeline for that. In reaction to this, well, actually, I believe it was the Gray Kessinger IO move that triggered Loperfido coming up, being a part of it. But maybe that was a little bit of a strategic way
yeah,
to kind of dilute
play it
the
all out.
uh,
Yeah,
Yeah, dilute a little bit of what was happening with that, and I guess we're just gonna see if he comes back. I think that's the biggest thing, and until we get more definitive information from any of the guys there, reports, from Espada, or Dana Brown, I'm not sure, Larry. I think it could go either way. I think it's what is it? It's like taking a hike with Robert Frost. It could go either way at this point.
Yeah, yeah. We'll see.
And
And
then I think the
so
other
McCormick's gone down. Kessinger's gone to the IL. It's kind of weird that Kessinger. I, my quote for the Kessinger IL is his shoulder got hurt carrying all the bags in Mexico City. That's what I said. He hasn't been playing. I mean, I don't know, guys. Who knows? He could have gotten throwing the ball around the infield in practice.
yeah,
But so Cabbage is up to. You got two articles. You want to see some articles on LGM? Click on the links. I will. By the way, guys, I will put the slide deck in with the video on the site. You can have the slides with the video, and you can see everything. And Amaya's here. I don't know that I've seen him watching a game, but he's here.
he's there
I think
somewhere.
he's even further down the bench than Kessinger was. So I'm not sure they let him out of the clubhouse. So
Yeah, but
he's
I mean,
just there
all
as
is
an
going well.
emergency. Yeah.
Yeah,
So all right. We'll see. All right. So since Abreu left, and this is some interesting data, I had a theory that Bregman was being hurt a little bit by the presence of Abreu and how bad he was, and they were pitching around him, and he was getting antsy and wanting to do things. But so what I really just did, and I'm probably going to track this. It's the sample size here is really too small, but Bregman has been better. Singleton has started out really good, and so he's been better than he was for the full year. Alvarez is really, like we mentioned with the moneymakers. He's really struggling, and I guess Clint and I will commit to you guys that we're going to break down Alvarez in one of the next couple weekly recaps. I guess we're kind of hoping it turns around, and it just Alvarez is pretty streaky, so let's just hope that he finds it and goes. Altuve's down a little bit. Diaz is down too a little bit. So that's who's up and who's down since Abreu left. All right, Clint, let's go on. All right, let's talk about Singleton, because Singleton has started out really, really well, and I think this fan base was kind of like really doubting, like, well, what are we doing with?
it caught him off guard, Larry. Yeah,
Yeah. So Singleton started all 6 games. Even he's played more than I expected until I did the exercise that's still coming. Uh, his WRC plus has been 197. For the folks that don't speak WRC plus, it's a 1.098 OPS. So over 1,000 OPS. For the WOBA people, that's a 452 WOBA. He leads the Astros in all those for the last 6 games. Okay, it's again small sample size. His ex WOBA, which is a little less sample size dependent, I guess I would say, his third. It's behind Pena and Tucker, but not by much. So that's 390. His BABIP's 188, which is really low for a BABIP. So one could argue he could be even hitting even better. He's not that what those two numbers together say with that xWOBA and that BABIP is he's not just getting lucky. He's really hitting the ball, 90.8 exit velocity, a good launch angle of 16.7. If you guys remember the last weekly recap, that's right in Clint's wheelhouse. What Clint said the ideal launch angle is 47% hard hit. So, guys, now here's the truth, right? And there's a bunch of numbers on this table. You see some red related to the fastball. Singleton's really good versus right-handed pitching, hitting fastballs. What I've done here is I've created a hybrid of the data set this data is I'll talk about it a little bit here because we're gonna reference it for some of the other players too. So what I've taken is minor league data from 23 and his major league data in 23 and his major league data in 24. Now for that minor league data, and I'll do this for Loperfino, I'll do it for Cabbage, and I'll do it for Kessinger as well. I multiply that data by 0.8. That's just what I did for my projections for Pena, which turned out to be pretty darn good, if I remember right, Clint.
Mhm.
Um, and so what this says is like, okay, we factor down the minor league data to something that might translate to the major leagues, and you see that overall that Singleton is about that XWOB with 313 in the upper left upper right corner there. That tells you that's kind of like your magic number in this table. 313 versus righties and then 280 versus lefties. Well, average major league player is about 319. So what I'm trying to communicate this is versus a right-handed pitcher, John Singleton is really close to give us average production, and you'll see that a 280 xWOBA versus left-handers may not be all that bad either. So, given some of the options, and you see why I choose to use xWOBA data versus the WOBA data because of small sample size like we have. One people, I mean, Todd Callis talked about in the game how like John Singleton has his reverse split. No, not really. It's just that the sample size is too small. Yeah, it's okay. His WOBA data is higher for him hitting a lefty, but that is not who John Singleton has been in the minors, and who, if you hybridize all that data, that's not what you should expect. You should expect that Singleton's going to be really close to average production, not the 197 he's been. So don't get mad when he gets cold, right? But if he's going to be a little bit less productive versus left-handed pitching, which makes sense, he's lefty. So that's this is the kind of, and we're going to use this data, similar data to this for other players as well. So don't get too lost in the data. I just wanted to go through it with here, but that's the big message. Singleton doing really well early, and if he continues, it's going to make this data look better and better, and then I'll be singing John Singleton's praises even more.
I think the big thing for me is what we have seen from first base and from Jose Abreu and switching over to John Singleton. You can see it from a production standpoint. It has just been a drastic improvement, even at this level. But you can still project out that it's going to be a great improvement, even as he kind of, not to say regress in a bad way, but as he kind of regresses back towards the mean of his
Yeah.
performance, from a career standpoint. But I think he had a lot of upside when he came up, and I think it's kind of paying off for him right now, and it's exciting, and hopefully he stays hot.
Yeah, it's really exciting because John Singleton is taking, this frankly is his last real big chance, and I'm excited for him. I mean, he there was reports that he was going to get DFA'd in that whole Abreu situation. So, I'm glad, I'm glad he didn't, and it's exciting to see what he's going to do here. And at least
Take
when
advantage of this opportunity. Yeah.
yeah, at least when Singleton's up, I always feel like you're going to get like, and this is bears out in the data, you're going to get a batter that's going to foul off the pitches that he can't really hit. And yeah, he's going to strike out some, but his strikeout rate's not even that high. And yeah, it's really kind of cool to see him work counts and work. There's times in the last few days, like he's been the best one at working the counts
Hmm.
against the other pitchers.
In
So
a day and age where that's a stat we can't track, as
right,
well, and maybe we can find a way, but he time and time again goes up there and forces those pitchers to earn outs, and that's always great. I mean, you can't put a price tag on that.
yeah,
So
all right. So one of the questions I think we've been asked, and Clint and I have been wanting to talk about is, all right. So low Perfito and cabbage are here. So there's two tables here, guys. The data is small. Don't get too lost in all the data here. But basically, we have 8 different Astros that could play first base or the outfield, right? And the guys in red are the guys really that there's hybrid data from the minors. Mainly data from the minors, although now I've put some of their major league data in the same way I did with John Singleton there. John Singleton's an orange because his data is almost kind of 50-50 majors and minor league data. But you see the players here, and what we've done. On the top, you've got them versus right-handed pitching, and the bottom versus left-handed pitching. And one of the things you should see is that not every player on this table is good at everything. So the to the left is the fastballs, to the middle is the breaking pitches, to the right is the off-speed pitches. One of the things you've heard me talk about is like, okay, the Astros have players that are good at some things, but not good at other things. You notice that on the lefties, you got one player that's really good against breaking pitches. That's Mauricio Dubon. Well, guess what should happen when the Astros face a pitcher that's really breaking pitch dominant to get outs? Well, Mauricio Dubon should be playing in that game versus that left-hander. And you can see there's similar ones on off speed pitches, and there's other guys that are just terrible versus these options. And in fact, some of these options are so bad that even a guy that's blue in this is better than the other guy than blue. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But so you got Dubon also being good versus off speed pitches versus right handers. So they're like, well, why are we playing Dubon versus a righty? Well, that guy probably throws a lot of off speed pitches that the other guys would have been made out on, even in the lefties. So I know everybody just wants to be able to say, well, DeBond should play here and Chad should play here, Myers should play every day, and like, what are we doing? Why are we making all these moves? Like, they're literally matching up, and the money makers see this data every day because the data here is the data that gets translated into the moneymaker tables and cross reference with the pitchers. And then what I come to is a single X Wobo for that day predicted based on the pitcher's pitch mix versus the batter's ability to hit those different types of pitches. And that's what goes into the moneymaker predictions. And that's why I'm telling you guys, I believe the moneymaker calculation, it's really, really going to be effective to pick out who's going to do well that night over the long term. So the point with this data is you see that there's guys that are, versus righties that excel, and then there's guys versus lefties that excel, and there also depends on the type of pitch, and that's going to be important where we're going down this path. Clint, am I missing anything as I talked about this and what we said in the preview?
No, I think this is all pretty spot on. My biggest takeaway for anybody watching and fans that are kind of questioning, we'll allude to it later, but you have your structure, you have your nine guys, you have your top six that are really strong, and those are the guys that you want out there every day. So the Astros just are being very particular to ensure that they're putting these guys in the best situation to succeed, to follow up with that 7, 8, and 9 lineup to then turn it over. Because you got to remember,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of this is how often can I get 1 through 6 up to the plate? How many times can I turn this lineup over? And so, as we'll talk about it here in a minute, Larry, we're going to get into more detail. I just expect fans to keep an open mind, number one, but number two, just recognize everybody's got a little bit of a strength and a weakness that
Right.
unfortunately other teams know about as well. So you're going
Right.
to see how the Astros platoon that, and we'll talk a little bit more about that here, coming up. So
Yeah, so jump back that up. Just one, I want to point out one thing about low Fido. So low Fido versus breaking pitches from right-handers is actually, of all these eight, he's actually has the best expected WOBA versus a right-handed breaking pitcher because the Astros really don't have a lot of players, even some of the core top six guys that are great versus breaking ball pitchers, and then you see this in like the Astros do seem to like you've seen the Astros do well against closers because those closers are throwing heat. And guys, the Astros are good at hitting fastballs. It's the
Larry,
guys that are throwing junk that they have problems with.
I mean, I swear, I know there was a weekly recap where we talked about this team is just such a good fastball hitting team.
That's
And
right.
there it
All right,
is.
let's go
It's
on.
still alive and well. So there's no changing the DNA of these guys for sure.
All right. So what we did with that. So I wanted to try and communicate like if the way I see, and I know this because I track the lineups every day, right? So what I like to do, what I like to try to do for folks is like, okay, what's going to happen? What options are they going to pull depending on the different kinds of pitchers, right? So for the fastball pitchers, there's a lot of different ways the lineup can be deployed. So basically, I gave 3 options versus the fastball pitchers. Okay, just because there's more than just three guys that are good for fastballs, and you can mix it up and actually rest different players and choose, and somewhat, there's fastball, but then there's different kinds of fastball. So, one of these may be the better versus the sinker versus the four seam fastball. I'm not really diving into that because I don't think the data is stable. Um, and even a full year of 2023 data is stable to be looking at those kinds of details. Then I also gave a column with the breaking ball pitchers, and then a column versus off speed dominant pitchers. Now, the truth is, as I talk about them with the money makers, that you got guys that are throwing 50% fastballs, 20 or 30% breaking pitches, and 20% off speed pitches. Well, what kind of dominant pitcher is that, Larry? Well, then you have to see how well they're throwing those different kinds of pitches, really, to answer that. So even a pitcher that's throwing like 60% fastballs, but if he's throwing 35% breaking pitches, and that breaking pitch is just like he's got an incredible slider, you may pick somebody the lineup out of the breaking column then as the lineup to deploy versus that guy. So what Clint and I talked about doing is like what's going to happen before McCormick and then after McCormick gets back. So the group into the on the orange table is really what's going to happen without McCormick, without Abreu, without Kessinger. And you notice, like, I was kind of puzzled, like, why is Singleton batting? Why has he started all six of these games? That wasn't what I was expecting. Well, now it is because
Mhm.
that's okay. I think I had to go figure out like where should Cabbage play first base? What's the best option? When do we how do we give John Singleton a day off right now? Because and then the answer would be a versus a left-handed pitching breaking dominant pitcher. And Cabbage is not great versus that. He's just not as bad as Singleton is.
Yeah.
And you'll see that in the table that we just showed. So Myers plays basically every day versus the lefties and plays about 40% of the time versus the righties. And you see the way the different pitchers are deployed. So you see Dubon, as I said, versus the breaking versus the off speed. You see Dubon in both of those because he's really one of the best options in versus those. And you see like what happens after McCormick gets back. Well, McCormick plays a lot, and once he comes back, and you see the different, he's playing basically. I have him every day versus a lefty, and then I have him 80% of the time versus a righty. So each one of these columns represents like about 20% of a normal pitcher. Right, about 60% of the pitchers I would classify as fastball dominant. That's what I'm trying to tell you. That's why
Mhm.
it makes sense to give three different options. And then about 20. That's close enough for what we're trying to do here. So that's this is so when you get frustrated that Joe Espada is not rolling out the same nine over and over again, I'm just telling you he's never going to do that because he's going to pay attention to data that's I'm giving you maybe the junior high version and they've got the grad school version, but the conclusions are going to be very similar to what the best option versus the pitchers are. And you can see that Singleton will get a little more rest when McCormick gets back because then you'll have Cabbage playing a little bit of first base. Then you'll have Lopervito playing a little bit of first base, mainly against the lefties. So there's better options in those opportunities. So I think this is really should be something interesting for this fan base to see. Like this is given the data I just showed in the previous slide. This is how I would translate it into like a playing time matrix.
I think it really speaks to like, folks when we talk about I guess that's what makes the moneymaker content so valuable is you really get it applied to a pitcher and you really understand the type of pitcher that you're facing. So you can apply tendencies from that pitcher to the data that we see on each of these hitters from, I guess what we would call them is our bench, our
Yeah.
bench or our platoon group here. And so you're gonna find options are good and bad for different types of pitchers and different situations, and understanding that, um, we're gonna want to make sure that these guys are in the right place at the right time, and so and you
Yeah.
can correct me if I'm wrong, Larry, but I feel like this is a very different team than we saw last year in this bottom portion of it. I think they have a little
Right.
bit more options and maybe a little bit
Right.
more versatility, but also just capability at the
Well,
plate than we
they have
kinda did
better
in the past.
yeah, they have better choices to make. Last year was kind of like, well, I got nothing but bad choices here, and I put Tucker in this table. Like this date is also in the Cabbage article, or I guess it's a earlier version of this data. It's in the Cabbage article because I was saying, well, when's Cabbage going to play? Kind of was essentially the focus of that, and the point, like I've updated this because I had Singleton playing a lot less, but now, seeing what they're doing, like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And maybe it just, I figure things out when I see that the team's a lot smarter than I am that they're doing. So the reason I had Tucker in there is like, well, I wasn't happy enough with what Chaz's playing time was, especially versus the lefties. So I thought, well, all right, maybe I can give Tucker one slot off. And so that's kind of what that fell into. Okay, let's go. So, and this is the point of all this data. So, like when you say, "Well, why aren't these guys playing every single day?" Well, if you translate that data from those tables, and if you assume that 75% of the pitchers are right-handed, 75% of the starters are right-handed, and 25% are left-handed. It's close enough for this approximation. Then you literally can go in and translate all that data into, like, okay, what, and don't worry about all the numbers here, just pay attention to the red column. So you'll see that Tucker plays 100% of the time. Okay, well, I didn't really tell you guys that. McCormick plays 85%. He plays 100% against the lefties and 80% versus the righties. Then you see Singleton's playing time over half the time, which then this is the data once McCormick gets back. Um, but Abreu's not, and you see the Abreu's down in there at 0. The Cabbage article has what I predicted with Abreu playing some. Um, so Singleton 55%, Loperfido 50%, Dubon 40%, Myers 35, and Cabbage 35. So what's interesting about this is I expect that they're going to utilize this bench or this like extended portion of the group. And Tucker's in the top 6, right? So you've got McCormick, Singleton, Loperfido, Dubon, Myers, and Cabbage. For assuming let's assume for a minute that Abreu doesn't ever return. How do you deploy those guys and keep all of them engaged and ready to go? And I think it looks something like this. And I'm sure there's fans like, like, well, Larry, you're doing the same thing to Myers that Dusty did. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair criticism. Like, I think Myers would do better if he played every day, but the realities are you can't play him versus the right-handed pitchers when and some of the right-handed pitchers when you've got those left-handed bats of Loperfido and Cabbage available. That's really what it amounts to. So that's my overall playing time utilization that takes the data from the previous slide and puts it into this table, so you can understand what I'm thinking we're going to see once McCormick gets back about playing time.
I think a healthy McCormick kinda slotting back in is gonna be a really nice, addition as well. I feel like he's kinda missed a little bit,
Right.
and maybe this just attributes maybe he just wasn't 100% when they started, and they just realized this is a good time to get him right.
Right, and the reality is I'm basing this on like who I expect McCormick to be. If McCormick's not that, his playing time's going to drop
It's good.
from what
Yeah.
I'm showing here. I mean, we can update it when we see what McCormick's really going to do. But McCormick's another one of the fairly streaky batters on the Astros, and he can get hot for a month raise his points significantly. All right, well, so all right, so this is like, what should the lineup be? Well, if you haven't already figured out, there's no one lineup. That is like the directive that people have. Well, Larry, tell me what the lineup should be. And um, you know, so Brandon, I'll get to that question in just a minute. So the realities for me is that this lineup that I'm showing here is really just reflective who's the highest, um, had the highest percentage on the previous line, basically. So versus lefties, that bottom has Chas McCormick, John Singleton, and Jake Myers in it, right? And versus righties, the bottom of the order has Singleton, McCormick, and Loperfido in it. But that's that doesn't reflect that Cabbage is going to play some in there, and Dubon's going to play versus the off speed pitchers and the breaking ball pitchers. So there's no one lineup at all, and so it's really a struggle to say, well, this is what the lineup should be. I think, and I've tried to adjust like Bregman down to the 5 hole, but he may deserve to go lower if he doesn't catch up. But so the columns here, like I've given like the grade that's based on the projected WRC plus for the rest of the season. Those are the grades. That projected WRC plus is straight from Fangraphs. Then the actual WRC plus is the next column over, and then what the actual expected WOBA is, because like so I could have put WOBA in the middle of those three and expected WOBA, but I think talking about there's no like there's no projected WRC plus of a player lefty versus righty, and so I'm trying to kind of give you what the overall Fangraphs projection for these players says they will be overall, and then kind of show you from the actual data and the expected WOBA data where they would be from like where their data says they should be from a playing time standpoint. So so Brandon's asked an interesting question. Like, if current production continues, who is the first to get traded on the list? I am not sure that any of the guys that are so once McCormick cuts back, as I showed, Dubon is more available. Dubon's not playing every day versus what he is playing. He's playing a lot right now, and he's playing a lot of outfield right now because, frankly, guys, he's the best option versus left-handed um, starting pitching in a lot of cases. So when McCormick gets back, that'll free up Dubon to be more of the utility role. I think Amaya is not needed at that point. So I think you'll have the 13. I think you'll keep Cabbage, and I think they'll keep Loperfido. Now Cabbage may be a little more iffy, but I think they'll keep Loperfido in the majors, and they'll do the timeshare that I've just talked about. Now, um, if anybody's getting traded, I think it's probably one of the top prospects in AAA that's getting traded. And I don't really. I mean, you could make an argument that the Astros take a Pedro Leon trade now that he's really showing signs of. And I haven't checked trade values in a long time, so I don't know what his trade value if it's up with his performance. But guys, I just think that when we get Chaz back and we get like a few weeks of Chaz in this lineup, when Chaz gets back, it's going to be really interesting who they send back down. Is it going to be Cabbage or is it going to be Amaya? I just made the case that it should be Amaya. So trades, it's interesting. There are a lot of early trades, Clint. A lot of teams are
Yeah.
already pulling the plug. Um, and there's a lot of this expectation in media that the Astros are going to start trading away all these guys, including Bregman. And I don't see any of that happening because I think this team's headed to 85 plus wins. So I don't expect any Astros to be traded um, in a salary dump move or
Yeah,
you know
they're
for
talking about
prospect.
Pedro Leon at a 1.5 trade value.
Um, that's that's pretty good.
Yeah.
That's you,
Um,
I mean
so that's
you
just based off of what I yeah.
make the argument that Jake Myers might be tradable, and that, you know,
That was my next name
this year.
to say was Myers would be one that kind of jumps out at you.
If there's a team that just is desperate for center field
It,
help,
at a
and
7.9 trade value, that's not
I mean, guys, when we talk about like what I mean, Clint, I showed. I guess that was the last episode. We're gonna about to have a bunch of pitching, and
yeah.
so it's I don't Brandon. I don't think there's any room on the 26 man for pitching. That's so one of the things we're gonna have to decide, and this is kind of like the exercise we went through last time, right, Clint? It's like, well, when these guys come back, who's on the pitching
Who
staff,
goes?
right?
Yeah,
We're about to see one of those decisions be made when Javier gets back, right? So
yeah.
Javier is supposed to be here by
You,
Detroit, so
I think it goes back to two things. So, it's kind of what I'm thinking obviously a little bit further ahead, but I mentioned today, like, what are we going to do with this outfield? Because we're kind of back in that situation because we've seen Jacob Milton turn up and start to, growing and developing and doing really well at Double A right now. Pedro Leon's doing well, so we've kind of got timelines. Kind of maybe do these guys they start to accelerate timelines on how they move up and down in the system, and so it's going to be really interesting how they kind of navigate that on top of the surplus of pitching. So,
right. So it's going to be really interesting because, like, I think the message to Loperfido, well, to Cabbage specifically, Cabbage, you when you get the opportunities, you gotta perform, right? And you might be kind of in that John Singleton pinch hitter role, the not the Singleton now role, the Singleton before role.
yeah,
Um, you gotta make the most of these pinches opportunities. You got to make the most of the playing time you do get, which think if I remember that table was like 35%. Right? So, he's got to make the most of yeah 35%. And Myers, same thing. Like Myers and Cabbage, you guys, you're gonna play every third day, maybe every other day, but you got to perform when you get the opportunities, or one of those two maybe go out to make room for I don't think Milton's coming to the major leagues this year, but
no.
he will be in AAA this. I'm pretty sure he's going to be in AAA in the next 2 months, and so it'll be interesting to see what happens. I got to turn my light on, Clint. You should have told me to turn my light on. Larry the Champ
I
never
mean, it
remembers
didn't
his
look
light.
dark on my side. Sorry, Larry.
No,
Everything looked fine and dandy, but I think I think. Do you remember when we went to watch the missions and we were like, man, there's a ton of left-handed outfielders over here,
yeah,
and now you
yeah,
look at the lineup now and it is turning back over to almost a it could 60-40, 55-45 split on lefties, and having that versatility. It's great
you're
to
right.
see.
Yeah, the seeing the lefties. So does Brandon? I don't know what's happening with it. Going to happen with Abreu. I mean, we kind of said it early. Like, I'm not. I'm not even sure he's going to ever leave. Like, well, I'm not even sure he's ever going to leave Florida. Let's just say it that way. He just may stay in Florida and just go retire. I don't know. And you could say, well, they just don't play him this year, and he comes back next year, and he's great. He just needed a bunch of off time. Who knows? I don't know. For me, banking on Abreu is sort of like banking on Forrest Whitley right now. So I don't, I just don't
Yeah,
know anymore.
it's gonna yeah. We're just gonna wait and see, and hopefully he does well if he does come back. That's really the big thing.
And when he does come back, those playing time tables get really interesting because he's a definite option. Like if he's Abreu, Uh, oh, you want to talk about Brian Abreu? Well, you know
Oh,
what, Clint? Let's talk pitching, and then let's hold Brandon's question about Abreu because That's a whole nother level of frustrating.
Yeah.
All right,
So
let's go to pinch. I'm gonna let me set you up here, Clint. You guys are about to get a treat because this is the stuff I get from Clint all the time. And Clint has been digging about like what's going on with Hader and his slider and what's going on with the sinker. And Clint's going to break it down for you in a way that he's putting on his scouting cap. He's looking in. He's been infected by LGM and his numbers, so he's going to do both my job and his job and break down the numbers for you. And so if you've left, you better come back and watch this part of the video because Clint's about to go. All right, I built it up for you, Clint. Go
I've
tear
got a
him
lot
up.
of I got a lot of pressure now. No big deal, right? Okay. So we're all very frustrated with Josh Hader, and we're frustrated with how these ninth innings are going. The home run the other last night, just it has been a frustrating time to watch our premier closer struggle the way he has. And I think what was important for me is, Larry and I talked about it really specifically. The slider is not the same, and I said that, and I agree. 1,000% agree. But for me, it's not enough to just dissect the slider. We need to dissect the sinker, the pitch that he pairs with it. So you're talking about a guy who throws these pitches. Larry, you can correct me if I'm wrong. It's got to be 95+% of the time.
Right. Yep.
I've eliminated the changeup from all the samples here in 2021, 22, these 4 years because there's just so little of it. And it doesn't really resonate with the rest of the table and the data we're really looking at because he never digs down and finds it. So I broke down and we're comparing these past 4 years. I'm looking at 2021 because 2021, from my WOBA and ex-WOBA standpoint, was the year where his sinker was the most effective. Now, obviously, his hard percentage was high, but his launch angle was, fly ball out type results there. And one thing I want to point out to everybody before we start with Josh Hader. Josh Hader is a very unique pitcher. Obviously, you can tell from the delivery, the style, everything, but he throws the sinker up in the upper part of the zone more than any any left-handed sinker pitcher you'll see. Watch Framber Valdez throw a sinker. If Framber Valdez is missing with his sinker up in the zone, he's in trouble. And we've seen that time and time and again. Hater's a little different, a little bit more octane, crazier delivery, stuff like that. 2023 and 2024 for the slider are really the 2 years, obviously this year, but 2023 was the year where Hader had the most success with the slider from the WOBA and ex-WOBA data. And we're kind of like interesting because it's like, wow, why has it drastically changed? I know he's got a WOBA 209, but that's not speaking to how it's projected to play out the rest of the season. And so, first thing is point is the sinker is better than it has been. So there's probably a little bit of a luck factor involved or bad luck factor involved. The slider has not been very good, at least not in, or it has been okay, but it doesn't project to be very good moving forward. So before I move on to the next one, Larry, you got any thoughts
So
on that?
one thing I will jump in, Clint. I meant to talk about this. Hader's got a BABIP of 400 right now, which is 120 points above his career BABIP number. So no, it's 145 above his career. His career BABIP's 255. So like that is reflected in that sinker number you just referenced. Like that delta between his ex woba and his woba on the sinker. There's where BABIP is rearing its ugly head. Now
Really?
you can make the argument this slider he's been lucky. And
Yeah.
the slider results should be worse than they've been. And that slider ex Woba is really concerning because it's like 50 points higher than anything. Like what happened? I think I ranted like two two shows ago. Like I don't know who stole my Josh Hader's slider, but I want them to give it back to him, right? Because I don't know what's going on with Josh Hader's slider, and you're gonna help folks understand, but yeah, his ex Wova has just been. And look at the hard hit rates, guys. 50%
Hard
on
hit
that
rate.
slider. That I mean,
And so I'm going to try to provide a little bit of insight and a little bit of explanation on why I feel these percentages, especially on the slider, are just climbing up year over year. but it's really important for everybody to note that um, it, the data doesn't look as bad as it is, but for his sample size and what he does well, that slider is incredibly valuable, and it is just fallen off a cliff. So, just briefly on the sinker, and the reason why I want to show it this way is um, take in mind this is a delta between season 2021 through 2024 with the sample size we have now. He's throwing the fastball or throwing the sinker slower than he was. He's increased the spin rate on it. There's going to be some numbers in here. When you look at vertical and horizontal release point, glove, arm, and movement toward and away from batters, those all kind of correlate the same way. And then you'll see a decrease or an increase in vertical movement. Those are going to correlate. So those, looking at the last six lines, they pretty much pair up together. But he's increased his vertical release point. Now his vertical release point is in feet here, and we'll get into a little bit more granular level on that data in a minute. So as his vertical release point has gone up, his horizontal release point has gone down. Now, what I mean by down is he's not throwing it horizontally anymore, he's throwing it more vertical. So there's the correlation. The glove and arm side movement and the towards away from batters has decreased. And now that 2.5 is that's going to be in inches. So obviously, if it's not going glove to arm side, he's left handed, throwing from left to right, then throwing toward right handed hitters from a left to right angle, those correlate. So there's a 2.5 inch decrease in the horizontal movement towards the batters. Then we get into the vertical downward movement, and that's basically where the pitch starts and ends as it crosses the zone. And Baseball Savant takes gravity into account here, so that's kind of factored out of it. So his downward movement on the sinker has it's gone down. So basically, it's flatter. So it's actually increased in the pitch of its height, and that explains the 2.1 increase in the vertical movement. So basically, his slider has gotten flatter, and it doesn't have the same dip or dive that most do. Larry, before I move on, does that make sense, or can I help clarify any of that before I move to the next part?
Well, at least for me, what this is saying is that that pitch doesn't drop like it's starting higher, it doesn't drop as much, and it's not sweeping. I, I don't under. Sometimes it gets confused with glove side and arm side, but it doesn't sweep across the plate near as much as it used to, and that
No.
that horizontal sweeping action, um, is really what makes that has made that pitch. Right. Yeah, I know this is a sinker, but it's made that pitch unhittable because it's move it's the lack of movement is really what you're pointing out here is the problem with the sinker. And you're gonna do the same with the slider, just
And so
previously.
for most point, because as a left-handed pitcher, most sinkers work down and away from a right-handed hitter. So when we say it's decreasing its glove and arm side movement, this negative trend actually means it's going the opposite direction. It's
It's
not
more over
moving.
the middle of the plate, right? I
It's
mean
more over
that's
the middle of the plate than normal. So we're kind of working in this world of this idea of this tailing and sinking pitch that is now flatter and straighter. That's basically where I'm going at with this. And then this is in a little bit of a granular level. So this is the year over year change from 2021 to 2024 now, and as we've seen, the velocity for his sinker has come down. It went up in 2022, comes down a little bit, so he's throwing a little slower. The spin rate has gone up overall, which is obviously you would think is not a bad thing. But I think what happens is when you correlate higher spin with a more vertical release point and a less horizontal release point, we create a more up to down spin on a pitch. When you watch Justin Verlander throw a four seam fastball at a high spin rate, that ball climbs. And so it has a rising effect, kind of like, as they say with Javier, he has a big, high rising four seam fastball that's hard to pair up. Well, take a sinker pitch that doesn't sink and actually creates a vertical ascending angle, and you're flattening out that pitch altogether. And this other data here on the right side is just talking about that variance of how that pitch is not moving either downward or away as it used to. Especially, and I'm using 2021 as a baseline because that was when it projected to be one of the best pitches he had over his career. So let me move on and we'll talk about the slider for a minute. So He's throwing the slider significantly harder since 2021. The spin rate is down on that pitch. Those two can kind of correlate. You throw it harder, you would think, I'm going to pull a little bit of speed off of it because I'm not going to be able to spin it and turn it as much. The vertical release point has increased. So remember, those are in feet. So he's about 6, 7 inches higher with his release point on that pitch compared to the horizontal release point that has now come up. That's why that negative number is working there. The glove to arm and the movement toward and away batters uh, is also alarming to me. Is that's 3.5 inches, 2 to 3.5 inches of movement that is not being created horizontally across the plate wherever he's throwing that. That doesn't factor in the fact that now, with all the other data that's kind of flowing in, with the more vertical release point, a little bit more velocity, the downward movement has now flattened it as well. So it's now moving 5.6 degrees less down than it was before, which kind of creates that 2.5 vertical movement. Now, there's obviously a little caveat on how that data kind of correlates. Um, and factoring in error of the sample, that's gonna, the sample size of everything. So, Larry, does that make sense as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same. It's the same basic disease, right?
Yeah,
it's two symptoms of the same problem. Like the pitch is starting higher, or I guess it's left-handed, starting
yeah,
higher, not dropping as much. So that's why at the end it's increase in vertical movement. Well, it's basically saying it ends up higher than it was by a couple
hmm
inches because it didn't drop as much, and it didn't move left or right as much. So it's just it's 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 a challenge because these pitches that moved, Hader was known for the movement. In fact, and you see Presley do this, and you see
hmm
Abreu do this, where the ball ends up in the dirt, and to be fair to Maldi and you see Diaz, they're having to throw their bodies at it sometimes to stop this pitch. Yet the batter still swung at it because there's also no crazy movement on that. And what this data is telling you is that yeah, Hader will get that sometimes, but he's not getting it near as much as he's been getting it, right? And that's part of the why it seems like guys are barreling up and getting harder hit rates on this pitch, both of these pitches. That like what's going on? The worrisome part, and we talked about before, Clint, is like I was just hoping that his he was tipping his pitches. If this is true, that's way more worrisome than this. Like, well, he's tipping his
yeah.
pitches somehow, and
And I
we can
think,
fix that.
and we could easily go either way on that point because what we'll see here with the data is obviously, think of it this way. A pitch he was throwing in the mid 83, 83.6 average in 2021, he has increased that velocity almost 4 miles per hour over the past 4 years. So he's throwing at 87 miles per hour. Combine that with a slight decline in the velocity of your sinker. You've narrowed the gap of different timing differentiation on those two pitches. The pitches you throw 95% or more of the time. So
Right.
you've kind of given hitters already a bit of wiggle room to time those pitches up a lot better. A decrease in spin rate, the higher vertical release point, horizontal release point. What's staggering to me, and what I really want everyone to understand is from 2021 to 2022, the vertical movement got better. So basically, when it means negative, that means that the vertical movement went down. That's obviously a good thing. That's why it correlates with the average movement. Downward variance goes up. The next 2 years alone, we have a 3.7 inch upward increase. And then if you look at it from the movement downward, it's a 6.5% movement upward. So that pitch has gone from moving, I guess you would say, anywhere from a 6.5 to 7 inch window to a half-inch window. I mean, that's what this is telling us. And that right there is also a recipe for a lot of disaster because what does that start to look more and more like? The sinker that you see.
Right.
Pair that away with less horizontal movement. As you can see, it's gone down, from 2022 where it got better down 2 inches all the way into 2024, and then 2.5, or no, 3.5 to 4 inches from in 2024 as well. So I guess in order to really describe this, when you have a ball and you have these pitchers releasing in the same release point every time, we're trying to mock the release point and the trajectory of each pitch over the same overlay. It's kind of like what Pitching Ninja does on Twitter. Now you have two pitches that were originally going kind of like this, so you're going to go away. Where now they're both kind of going over each other,
Right.
and it to me it just creates it gives the hitters more of an opportunity to time and sync up on the pitches you're throwing.
So
And
Clint,
I think that
how
that's a huge issue.
so is what's the fix for that?
So let's. I'm gonna pull up two clips real quick, and these are
Okay.
things that I'm trying to notice, and this is what I've been digging into because I think it's important for everyone to kind of see, and obviously anybody who can see these things better than me, I tell me and correct me, but I think that there is a strong correlation with what we're about to see here for a second. So we'll blow this up in the wide view. But what I really notice right off the bat is Hader sets up on the left side of the mound. So when he's set up towards the left hand batter's box, throwing kind of across into righties. Now remember his delivery's way out left, it makes sense. One of the first things that stood out to me, and it's kind of what I've seen with Brian Abreu, is right here in this clip, and the reason why I want to show it is um, you can see where his foot is, and obviously it's at an angle. His foot looks much more square to his body line. So I've always imagined like when I'm pitching, my shoulders are like railroad tracks down the line of which I'm pitching.
Hmm.
I need to stay in that box in those railroad tracks to be effective in timing the release point through the plate. I have to time that up with foot coming down the right way, body staying square to a certain point. Like there's just movements, and a lot of people always equate it. It's timing. It's how do when the foot comes down, the hand goes over the top. That you one. I talk about Verlander a lot. Verlander's really good at that. It's fun to watch Verlander because he times it up really well, right over the top, boom. But this action right here, especially on pitches like a slider, I mean, I know it's out and away, but it really gives you a good indication of what he's doing from there. So, one other thing is this is another pitch. So, this is going to be a slider down and away that he threw last year. That body and those lines look much more square. And it literally looks like his left foot and right foot are crossed. And that's what's creating that really strong angle that you see through the bottom of his legs and across where his thighs almost look like they're touching. His front side stays closed longer. Therefore, the pitch comes in and look at the downward movement of that pitch. I know it's kind of hard to see, so I'm more than happy to try and do it again. But Larry, you can kind of see how he was able to create much more of a downward and across tilt. So let's look at one of the at bats against Juan Soto. So I'm gonna try to time this up. This was one of the better videos I could find that really kind of correlates with what I wanted to do here. But see, so he throws a sinker up and away. But let's watch his feet as he comes down and through. We're gonna watch where this left foot. I wish I had a cursor that where his right foot opens up. So we'll see here.
Hmm.
He's more square, and the slider's a little bit more down and across, right? Slightly. It's not very strong. Now he comes back. He's gonna come back with a sinker here. Square, boom. But he's up and away. Now we have what should be a slider. But my issue is when you look at this lower body here, his foot seems it could be 3 inches, it could be 4 inches, 5 inches. He seems to be much more towards the right-handed batter's box of the plate. So
Hmm.
when my weight and my body goes one way, the hand goes out and away from me. It's centrifugal force. That's how it's all designed. Well, if my foot goes out, my shoulder goes down and away, my arms get more extended. So we were talking about the data showing, well, why is he so much more vertical and out? Because his body is a little too far open. Uh,
Hmm.
so I'm not losing you.
Well, and Clint, I worry that that puts a lot more torque on the body too when you're
So there's a
like,
physical aspect to that as well. Yeah. The extension of the elbow really working out in a way, number one, limits your ability to create movement, but also put yourself in more of a risk for injury. And I think that would
right,
be more of an injury for the rotator cuff into the bicep more than so the elbow. But it's hard for me to really want to harp on what his
right,
elbow and stuff goes through because he's such a unique pitcher. It's he's been pitching like this for so long. It, Sometimes I feel like some guys just are naturally blessed with their bodies working with what
right,
they're doing. But these are the things that I've kind of seen, and I saw it with Abreu a little bit. I feel like his front side is flying way open, and that's just and obviously it's the other way. Front side's flying way open. He's leaving sliders out there left and right. That also could be why he's hitting right-handed batters as much with fastballs, and he's up and out. But it's all timing and their delivery. But if right off the bat, that I would like to see him stay more square, almost creating a inverse line because
mhm.
the way he delivers a pitch from so far out and to the left, I think it just opens him up to not being able to get that release point right and really putting him in a bind to kind of combat the fact that the slider's not working. So then am I overthrowing the sinker? Am I adjusting in the wrong ways? And
Right,
I think,
and
it's very interesting
and
to watch this happen.
yeah, and you started like Hater basically throws two pitches, guys, and they both complement each other. And if you know, yeah, I know. I just worry about the adjustments from the pitching staff and the pitching coaches. But here's the so let me give one positive data point here, Clint. So as much as we worry about Hater and Presley, those two, the Hater's FIP is 3.09. Right, this is a guy that has a career FIP of 2.74. So that's not that bad, but you're bringing out a lot of metrics that are, quite frankly, are worrisome here, unless they're intentional. Like I don't know necessarily why somebody would be trying to create less side to side movement or whatever, but Hayner's ERA is 6.14. His FIP is 3.09, and that gets back to that 400 Babbitt, right? So and that differential is coming down. And we talked about that on one of the previous shows too, Clint. Right? Like we've got several pitchers that have these elevated Babbitts that have these massive 50 ERA gaps, and it's luck. And that basically screams luck. But you've done a great job here of like, well, maybe it's luck, or maybe it's you know maybe they're making the contact isn't huge, but it's just easier contact because and it's enough to get and his yeah, let me finish the thought here. The ground ball rate. This is a guy that has a 30% ground ball rate, and this year's at 51%. Something's different there, Clint, and it probably that probably goes back to like that ball's more center over the plate than it's ever been, and guys are maybe guys are just saying stop trying to hit home runs off this guy, just just get the ground balls in through the holes. I don't know. I don't.
It was interesting because we saw the Atlanta Braves do that to him. I
Yeah,
don't know if you remember specifically that last inning. Those quality hitters went up there and said, "We're going to simplify and we're going to hit this ball right back at him," and they were successful.
right.
It comes down to approach. It comes down to that, and one thing I just want to mention, Brandon, is one of the caveats to this is these guys are throwing incredibly hard, and there's so much movement and so many things going on that even the slightest miss in timing or the slightest opening or not even being fully square when you plant your foot or planting your heel first before your toe. I know that sounds really kind of insignificant, but that type of stuff throws off the timing and completely ruins the release point that you would have for any pitch that you throw. So This may not be the easiest thing for them to see. I just thought that the data really projected like there's stuff changing for him, and it's been a year over year thing. But this year, why is it so much more significant? Well, maybe it's a
Yeah.
mechanical thing. Maybe it's a physical thing. Maybe
Well,
he truly is tipping pitches, but I think we might have a mix of both.
yeah, we might have, and the other possibility, Clint. Here we are on May 6th, and I don't really know. Like, I haven't ever looked at Hater month to month. Is he the type that starts out slow and he's like spending the first 2 months of the season figuring out his mechanics, and then
No, I've had
June,
a,
July,
I've,
August, and September he just nails it, and that
yeah,
and these numbers all get better. I don't know.
yeah. I've always had the thing, and it's kind of what I learned about him and just watching and reading about others. So some folks were not as happy with him because of how he pitched or like the schedule, and he's only available for certain things and stuff like that. But he's never really been one that kind of had these peaks and valleys. I know,
Right.
everybody has bad starts, but this type of stuff to me just it screams to me that there's just something that's become a consistent issue. Um, and it's going to be interesting to see how he adjusts and makes changes, and what type of change can you make for a guy like him who has feasted on hitters with this aggressive delivery and and stuff like that. And yeah, Brandon, there is some data and stuff like that over what you see in Savon, and that might be something I want to pull into later. But one thing I noticed when I was looking at pitch overlays, because not necessarily pitch overlays, but it shows pitch trajectories and stuff like that across the plate, is you see a lot of sliders backing up. And what I mean by backing up is they're not breaking horizontally; they're just kind of flat and breaking down and almost working in the opposite direction of where they're designed to be thrown. And that obviously that's a recipe for disaster as well. We've seen so many
Right.
pitchers in the past do that, and you know, usually those pitches find the Crawford boxes or somewhere. They find a fan out there in left or right field. So
So one of the things you just should have learned from all that is Clint is awesome. He really is. That's why he's Clint the Scout, and that's why, like, I gotta keep this guy. Gotta keep this guy engaged. He's got to do this weekly Astros recap for you people because you need to hear this man because he's awesome. And maybe he's just as good as any of these other people. I don't know. I mean, he's not armed with all the information they have. He doesn't have the high speed cameras breaking it down frame by frame. But he just went through and gave you guys some really good content. Clint, that was awesome. What else do we have, Clint?
we're just gonna
So
review the upcoming schedule and talk about what we're expecting. I make sure to note everybody we're gonna play 16 straight games without a day off. So we might see some up and down movement with the pitching staff. We might see some guys get days off that we're not happy about, but it's gonna be another rough ride, I think.
so this is interesting, right? Because we got one of the best teams in baseball, the Yankees. Like, and we're going there. Let's see how well we do. I think we're in a better place than we were when we played the Yankees before. Then we're supposed to get Javier back during the Tigers series. The Tigers are 18 and 17 right now. I think that's a winnable series, even though it's on the road. Then we've got to go. I mean, Clint, I wrote the moneymakers an article. It's like, who are your best bet? Who are your best odds? And I said, well, let me just say moneymakers. I'm gonna cancel out the teams that are tankers, and I'm gonna cancel out the teams that are like the blue bloods, because the blue bloods are always going to trade. If they're not where they need to be, they're going to go trade and get to where they need to be. And the tankers are always going to tank, and they're going to be worse than they should be otherwise. But the Oakland Athletics were the number one on the list of like gaps to like where their Las Vegas odds were, and I said, guys, I'm just like, don't buy in. We don't like with their stadium situation, they're tankers, and they could sell off all the team. That still might be true, but the Athletics are off to a really good start, and and the Astros need to go get them, right? They're 17-18 right now. The Astros got to go get them. The Brewers, they're leading the division, right? So we got two division leaders, and then we got the Angels. And guys, God bless Mike Trout and the Angels, but
Well, they won't see Mike Trout this
yeah, you
unfortunately.
know.
Yeah.
And so the Angels were actually one of those teams I thought was going to break their projection, but
Mhm.
now that's not looking too good because Mike Trout's hurt again,
And
and
I
half
think
the team's
Rendon's
hurt.
hurt too, so that's
Yeah,
another.
Rendon's hurt, so who knows what they're going to do, but
Yeah.
so there's some opportunities here with the Tigers, the Athletics, the Angels. The Astros need to do well in those series. They need to at least get one in New York, and at least get one. They need to take two against the Brewers.
Yeah.
The Brewers' offense has been insane, and I think maybe it's an opportunity for the Astros pitching by that point to cool them down.
That
I
and it
will
might be
say,
an opportunity for Hader to
fix
wanna
it.
go back and show a little something, something.
Yeah, I mean,
Maybe he
so
finds his
Clint,
old self over there too.
yeah, yeah. So Clint, the thing is, this team has opportunities. I really truly believe that it's going to get better. I keep saying that. I even now I still think this team's going to win 85 games, and maybe even 90 again. And people think I'm insane when I say that, but I'm looking at the data. I'm looking at when you bring back the pitchers. So guys, stay with Clint and me. Come to the weekly recap every week. But guys, if you've enjoyed this at all, please like the video. Please subscribe to the YouTube channels that Clint and I have because we need the support. And if you find any value in the stuff we're talking about, then come to the Larry the GM website. That, like we've referenced multiple times, the money makers see this stuff almost daily, and the premium members see it at the beginning of the series, and you can a lot of this data is in the tables that the premium members get before a series start. So you're you're going to be a smarter baseball fan if you just invest a little bit in your knowledge base for baseball. And guys, I know you're like, well, Larry, why can't you give it to us free? Well, guys, I work a lot. I mean, it's literally a full time job giving you this stuff for the Astros every day during the season. So, I mean, I spent the entire day putting together the stuff that I was assigned to by Clint the Scout for this video. So, um, you know, it, I think I deserve a little compensation for what I'm doing, and that's what I'm asking for. It's on sale, 25% off. It's a fourth off, so now's your time because
You
I'm
know
at some point I'll pull that deal. I'm not sure when yet.
my big thing is, like, we try to the goal is to bring a content that's different than everything you receive. You're not listening to Sports Talk Houston, you're not listening to, some other any reading any tweets or posts or stuff like that that's not really talking about what we are talking about. At least I don't believe so. If there are, let me know, and we can we can find a new avenue to go down, I guess. But this is, as Larry and I always call it, it's the game within the game. We're looking at this stuff day after day, and I honestly think that these next 16 games, even though there's not a day off, I think they have opportunities to win this series against the Yankees. I think they've got a chance to take the series in Detroit. I I don't want to discredit this team and how good they are. And we've seen time and time and again, usually your best players, your studs show up, and I think it's going to become time. And it's eventually
Yeah.
the levee breaks, and the talent overcomes all. And so it's you know just a war of attrition at this point.
Well, and I'll say this too: like this team, if they don't start doing it, it is gonna get too late pretty soon. And um, so guys, thanks for joining us, and we will be back with you tomorrow on the website. You number one, you'll get this video and the slide deck on the website, and then we'll have content for the new series with the Yankees, and Moneymakers will have their update, and you'll see some of the things we've been talking about. It's going to be really fun to watch, like what this team does with Loperfido, Cabbage over the next. We've got more lefties in our offense, and it's going to be interesting to see how Espada manages all the lefties. All right, guys, Clint, let's call it a night, and thanks
Yes, sir.
for hosting us, and thanks for making it happen.
Thank you, everybody. Follow, like, tweet us. Let us know what you need. Besides that, we'll see you next week.
All right, take care.